Life Beyond Labels is a Quiet Loud Studios production, proudly featured on Sports E Media. Discover more at quietloudstudios.com. Background music created by Yo Crane. Hello, and welcome back to the Life Beyond Labels podcast. I'm your host, Kelsey O'Connor, and I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Sydney Supple. Welcome, Sydney, to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun for us. We're switching roles, so I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. I was actually on Sydney's podcast, From the Players. Great podcast. You all should check it out. And Sydney and I grew up actually in the same Midwest softball circle. We played for the same organization, just on different teams growing up. She's from Wisconsin. I'm from Illinois, so some Midwesterners at heart. Sydney also had the chance to meet my brother because they're both Newhouse grads from Syracuse. So super awesome. So I've kind of had the chance to get to know Sydney over the last few months since being on her podcast. But so cool that we were always near each other and now kind of get to connect in this way. But before I tell you about just all of the incredible things that Sydney has accomplished, all of the things that she's continuing to do, in an effort to be a self-aware podcast, I'm going to introduce Sydney's energy and character to you first. Like I said, I've known Sydney for the last few months, and I just have to tell you all, she is generous with her time. She is one of the kindest people I've probably met. Just always such a great attitude, running around the world, and yet makes anyone that makes me feel like a priority when I reach out to her and ask her to be here. So just an awesome person, hardworking, gives back to her community. And you just have this confidence that I feel like really radiates from you, and this genuineness to empower young girls, and the things that you're doing is just so aligned with who you are. So it's so awesome to have you. And now I'll kind of get into some of the things that you're doing.
You're so sweet. Oh my gosh. I'm like blushing.
So Sydney, growing up, Sydney was a 3-time area player of the year. Sydney's proudest moments, if I can speak for you from some of your interviews, is raising money to actually build a softball field back at her home community in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is just incredible. Sydney played softball at Northwestern. They won a few Big Ten championships, played in the Women's College World Series. Then Sydney went on to study journalism in grad school at the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse, where my brother also went. So go Cuse. Sydney has worked for CBS Sports, done work with the Big Ten, Softball America, and is really just using her platform for content creation, podcasting, blogging, and really empowering young women in sports, and just kind of making her mark on the sports world and the world itself in general. So I'm so excited to have you, Sydney, and welcome you back a second time.
Oh, thank you. My gosh, the sweetest. I think it's such a testament that the world is so small, especially the sports world, how I feel like we live the same life in different ways. And now I'm so glad we're able to connect.
I know, this is really actually so cool. It's the softball world is a small world, so
It is.
even though we didn't cross paths before, it's really cool that we're crossing now. And just kind of to start, I mean, it's so interesting. You are on the other side of this. You're so used to telling other people's stories and are inquisitive in that way. But I would love for you to just kind of walk us through your story. If someone asked you, what is it? If you could just kind of walk us through whatever you're willing to share with us.
Mm. It's such a fun question because you can start in so many different ways. But I think for me, the biggest thing is I'm actually back home in my hometown right now just for a day, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is where my journey really started. And it started with my family. I think I grew up in one of the most loving, supporting households I could have ever imagined. And as I go along through my story, what's really amazing is the people that I had with me from day one is the people that I still have now in my corners, no matter where I'm living. Um, that I think is where my story really starts, is with those people that I'm blessed to call family. It's amazing. I played 19 years of competitive softball, and my dad and mom never
Wow.
missed a single game, which still blows my mind looking back at it. You've been to all the travel ball games and the college circuit. There's so many games. And the fact that they were just always such a present face for me is just, oh gosh, I can never thank them enough. But growing up in Oshkosh, started playing softball, but really started playing a million sports when I was young, anywhere from sailing to gymnastics. I just love to be active. I love to meet people. And I think I always knew there was something special about sports, but it's taken me a long time to understand that what's really special about sports is the people. And that's kind of like the root of my journey. And I learned that through my playing days and now my broadcasting days. But eventually I decided softball is the path I want to go on, play for the Beverly Bandits, which is where we have the fun connection. And it's such a fun travel ball organization because I was able to travel the country and just play with people from all over. I played with one girl when I went 12U to 18U. I played with one other person from Wisconsin. So I got to meet,
Wow.
I know, crazy. I got to meet so many people, which was so fantastic. And it allowed me to commit to a school that I absolutely fell head over heels for, which is Northwestern. And I'm like rubbing them today. And I think what's so fun is like I committed in seventh grade. So now I can say like I've had purple in my blood since, gosh, 12 years now. But it's fun being now kind of on the experience side. People always ask me like, take me back. Like what should you think about when you're recruiting? And if anyone's listening, it's a job, it's recruiting, it's college. If you're ever looking to make a decision, I think the number one thing I'm most thankful for is I found a coach and a school that loved me as much as a person, as a player. And I'll forever be thankful for that. I'll forever call Northwestern one of my homes. When I was living in New York and I had to come back to Chicago, I literally stayed in the guest room of my coach's house. I mean, that's how much her door was just always open to us. I don't think I go a week without calling or texting my pitching coach, my associate head coach, and my head coach. So thankful for that journey. Go through high school. Um, like you said, I was fortunate enough with some of those awards, but I think the best part about those awards is it taught me that I wanted to give back so much more. And I mentioned I started playing for Beverly Bandits, which is the team out of Chicago when I was 12 years old. I really didn't have that connection until high school to my hometown because I couldn't have it with sports. Like, unfortunately, my travel ball hometown team wasn't going to travel anywhere outside like a 30-minute radius. And that to go to college, you just had to get more. There wasn't that exposure here in the state. So I really knew that when I was in high school and I was getting ready to go to college and play Power Five, play Big Ten, I I wanted to fix that situation for the people who were coming after me. I am super blessed. I have 5 nieces and nephews, and I think about them in every decision I make every day in life. And I always just thought about like, gosh, like my niece, my nephew, like I don't want them to grow up thinking they have to drive to Chicago every single weekend just to play college softball. I wouldn't change my experience for the world, but I don't want someone else to do that. And that's where the fundraising of the softball field started my senior year. We raised over $110,000. I went off to Northwestern. It took over a year and a half to build, and I got to come back after my freshman season and open up our field, which is probably one of the most special moments ever. And I think the only other moment that is equally as special is after I got done playing my 4 years, I got done with my master's, all the things you mentioned, I was able to host my first inaugural hometown camp on my field this summer and bring back all of my Northwestern teammates, all of the girls I played in the Big Ten who are from Wisconsin. So that to me was like the ultimate. I think I walked around the field for like hours afterwards. Like, I don't know
That
how
is so
that happened.
special.
Thank you. I know. So I feel like that was a long story in the beginning, but such probably one of my favorite moments in my life for sure.
Yeah, that is so special, and I think it is so cool that you gave back and yet show this continuous support for wanting to bring back camps, and I just think that's really special that your nieces and nephews are sorry, did you say nieces or
Yep,
nieces and
both.
nephews?
I got them both.
You got both, okay. That they impact your decisions like that, and, I guess just walk me through you committed in 7th grade, which
Mhm.
is super early. And growing up in the travel ball scene, there's a lot of rankings.
Yep.
There's just a lot that kind of puts you into certain categories of how good you are at a certain age and where you're going to get recruited and committed. How did you stay grounded during that time at that early age?
Honestly, a lot of it is credit to my family. I think the travel ball scene is as crazy as now, even without the recruiting process of you're constantly traveling across the country. You're constantly spending your weekends playing games, playing games. And what I commend my parents for doing such a great job of, if we were going to California, we were going to go a day early or a day late, and they were just going to let me be a kid. And they were like, go to the beach. Let's go to a nice restaurant. Like pick something fun you want to do. So for me, it was always softball, but I always got to experience the lifestyle of things too. And because you give up a piece of your childhood when you play competitive sports. That's just like the nature of it. But they did whatever they could to really like allow me to hang on to it and just be a kid on that day. Or, I think about the time where my parents drove me back as quick as they could after my last game in Crow Point, Indiana. My mom did my hair in the car, painted my toes, and my dad drove so I could go to my first homecoming. You know? And so
Hmm.
there has to be a balance. And I think that balance is what kept me grounded, even though probably 75% of my time was, focused on being a good softball player and a good student. I still had that other 25% that I got to enjoy. And that allowed me to still be a kid in a way.
I really love that, especially because, in that avenue too, you want to be 100% committed. You want to wake up early, go to bed late, and give
Yeah.
it everything. But if it's truly 100% of your time, then that's where everything kind of caves in. And so for you to be supported in balancing and just kind of experiencing life outside of the sport. And that way, I mean, I wonder, was it a little bit less difficult of a transition? Not that it probably wasn't difficult, but when you were transitioning out of college sports into your next step in your career, did you kind of have that balance to fall back on because you had been encouraged to be more balanced and well-rounded as a kid?
I am so thankful that I think I found when I was in college what I wanted to do outside of softball. And that was, sports journalism, broadcasting, podcasting, writing, interviewing people. I had such a passion for that Northwestern really allowed me to explore even when I was playing. I pitched them, I was like, I want to start a weekly blog. They're like, great, go do it. I want to interview our teammates, like, go do it. And all of these things just allowed me to get excited about when, I'd hang my glove up after practice that I got to go talk sports. And I got to do what I said in the beginning of this, which is what I love most about sports is the people. And I got to just ask them about their story, which, what we're doing now, and just listen, because I think the beauty is every single person has a story. And I am just obsessed with wanting to hear everybody's. And so finding that balance in college definitely 100% like prepared me to jump into something I love as well. But if I'm being completely honest and candid, which I always try to be, it was
Yeah.
hard. And I don't think it hit me because, this master's program, you're working so much. You don't even have time to think or to feel till probably like almost an entire year passed. And then it really hit me of like, wow, I'm not going back to my normal life, which is what I know. So that has been really fun and interesting. And I appreciate my coaches and my teammates and my friends who've just sat and listened with me of being like, this feels really weird. I'm not going to walk into a locker room anymore. I'm not going to, be with my teammates right after practice. And that has taken a lot of navigating and also a lot of like real and honest conversations where I've had to open myself up and say when things feel hard or I miss it, because then that allows me to find ways that they'll never replace it, but it's finding that community and other things. And, my teammates are still some of my very best friends. I now moved close to them. So it's like we're still living our lives together. It just looks different now. But it's been a year and a half now of navigation, and it probably will always be a navigation because I think it's a part of you that
Yeah.
when you stop playing a sport, it's like mourning a loss in a way.
It really is. I mean, I love that you're able to have those conversations because honestly, what's crazy is I played at NC State and now I'm going back to NC State for my
Right.
master's. Um, and it still hits me. Like it's been 3 years removed since I stopped playing softball. But it really doesn't go away. Like even by now, I'm like, how am I not over this? How is this so nostalgic for me? Why are my feelings fluctuating so heavily while I'm on this campus, reminiscing about softball, reminiscing about college, just multiple transitions all at once. And
Mhm.
so just for you to even highlight, like just having the conversations, because it's not really solvable sometimes. Like we won't walk into a locker room and that's really sad to think about and we miss it. But at the same time, just being able to say, like, I really miss it. This sucks, but I'm going to try to find magic somewhere else. And it's not going to replace that feeling, and just acknowledging that that's okay, and just finding magic and joy in things going forward. That's really special that you're able to just kind of talk about that with your teammates and have those people to do that. Because yeah, it's a constant process, I will say, but
It absolutely is. In my head, coach used to always say something, and it was that you could do hard things. And I've like changed my, I've always believed in it, but it's amazing when sometimes a hard thing is just saying that this feels so weird right now. Like you said, I'm back on campus. Why am I not the one in uniform? Why am I the one heading up to the broadcasting booth? Like, this is weird. And sometimes that's just the hard thing you have to do that day, is acknowledging your feelings. And the hard thing can be different the next day. And it's something that sticks with me over and over that she always told me.
I love that. Are you and tell us who your coach is?
Kate Drohan, let me tell you, that woman, all the praise, all the honor, all the glory, how many times Big Ten Coach of the Year. And she is about it as real as it gets, from the day she recruits you, the day you play for her, and the day she will come to your wedding. And she is just as real and loving as it gets. And I'm so, so thankful to have played for her.
That's awesome. And I just want to point out, I mean, I'm not trying to like over theme my podcast, but I really love the way that you describe her. I have had a chance to meet her a couple times. I grew up in the Midwest circle. I went to some Northwestern camps. No, I did not get recruited, but I think those coaches are awesome. And but I really appreciate you kind of just describing the people in your life that way, just kind of how loving they are, how their doors always open, because on the outside she is a Big Ten championship coach. Just an incredible list of accolades, but so cool to kind of just see you kind of describe the people in your life and how they've impacted you. And it's definitely evident in the way that I think your work is impacting other people. I think that's awesome. I want to pivot a little bit. I feel like with a lot of the outward performative things that you're doing, whether it's broadcasting or softball, you have to exude confidence. And I'm curious, like, is that confidence always natural for you? Do you turn it on sometimes? Like, what keeps you confident? Do you experience doubts? Like, what is that process for you?
I love this question because I think it's such a mix of both, where I think confidence in some respect, I always say, is like partially like you're born with it. But I think 90% of it is like it's an acquired taste per se, like an acquired habit. And there is some days where I feel like I'm faking it till I make it, until I have to like make myself believe it. But for some reason, for me, like being around a mic, or having someone to talk to in an interview, like I feel so comfortable and so natural in those settings, which I'm super thankful for. But I think there's other areas that I do still struggle with confidence. And I actually had a really long talk with my mom about this recently, because I think I was at a point where I was getting some gigs that I was really excited about. They were like some of my biggest ones at the time. And you start to ask yourself, like, you're like, okay, like, am I ready for this? Well, they wouldn't put you in it if you weren't, but you start to get in your head and you doubt yourself. And then I went to my camp, and what I gave my campers instead of a camp t-shirt was I made them a notebook that had advice from every single one of, my former teammates who came back to work my hometown camp with me. And so much of the advice was about confidence. And I had a blank page after all the advice, and I had them write one thing they love about themselves from 10U to 18U. And I can't tell you the amount of girls who had nothing to write. And
Whoa.
I know. And it like blew my mind just watching them. Like, I would ask them questions. They'd be crushing it. They'd be writing, they'd writing. I'm like, okay, like last one, easiest one, like one thing you love about yourself. And the way that like they would stop. And it just broke me. And I would have to like look at somebody and be like, okay, she's your friend, right? Like, what do you like about her? And they'd rattle off like 20 things. And then they'd switch and they'd rattle off 20 things. And I think that's what we're so good at as women, is like knowing what we love about other people, but we're so bad at knowing what we love about ourselves. And that is something that I would be such a hypocrite instead of I was amazing at. Like I'm also terrible about it. But that moment made me realize, if I am pushing these young girls to find one thing they love and tell them, like, you need to practice this every day, looking in the mirror, one thing you love about yourself, like I have to start doing it, and I have to believing it to like to my core. So that's been my challenge lately, of like even some days where I'm feeling doubtful, or I'm not feeling confident, is like looking in the mirror and making myself find like one thing, because I can't ask a 10-year-old to do it if I can't do it at 23. So that's been my journey with that.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I love that you gave them advice books. That is so
Thank
special
you.
and awesome. And it's so interesting too, like working with kids. I did something so similar. I spoke at a camp, and you know where they have like the mirror in the box and they have to like
Yes.
say something nice to the person in the box, which is themselves because it's a mirror. And kids really struggle
Hmm.
saying it about themselves, but then they loved kind of doing affirmations for other people.
Yeah.
But I think it is so cool that you saw that and then recognized, like, how am I going to model this for the girls that I'm coaching? And I think that's such a really cool takeaway for people to think about is how are they modeling
Hmm.
affirmations and confidence and self-care if they are, wanting these kids to grow up confident, wanting the kids in their lives, or not just kids, but the people around them, to be kind to themselves and have a kind inner voice. So I think that also, is a testament to athletics, is walking your talk. And so that's really
Hmm.
cool that that's something that you're practicing actively and having to be in such a confident role in your work and in the things that you're doing.
I love that you did that with the box and you experienced that too. And what I get excited about is like those people that you just worked with, like if they can learn confidence at 10, 12 years old, like think about the women and the men they can become, like sky's the limit if we can teach like the younger generations that confidence, because once you have it, like you can hold on to it forever, which I love.
I love that. I want to know, like, what advice would you give? I guess two questions. What advice would you give to your younger self, or what advice would you give to just a young player that might, listen to you and be like, that's great. I want to be confident, but you're so successful and I don't know if I'm going to be like that person who's having doubts and living in their unknown right now.
Oh gosh. I've asked this question to people so many times. I've never asked myself this. Honestly, I think my mom tells this to me all the time. I'm going to steal her line, is to give myself grace. And I think that's in the sports world. And I think that's outside of it because, I so appreciate you listing all the things I've done. But I think if you were to ask me, I would tell you at the end of the day, all the things I didn't get done. And that's that competitive mindset that I talk to my teammates about it all the time, where we're now like some of them are in the finance world, or they're studying to become doctors. And we're like, gosh, like we're just so insanely competitive because we had to be to get to the very top, to, play Division 1 softball, to play in the Power Five, to win Big Ten titles. We had to be obsessed with trying to get to as close to perfect as we possibly could, even though we know perfect is completely unattainable. We still try to reach it. And it's like when something doesn't work, you got to drill it in 100 more times. Well, that's not really how life is. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I have to try to learn to switch on and off is like, well, I could try to obsess as having the most perfect backend as I possibly could. That doesn't mean I need to be perfect, like as a friend, as a partner, as anything, as a daughter. And I think I hold myself to that same standard all the time. And I'm trying to learn to give myself grace of like, I wasn't perfect in this area today, but what can I learn from it tomorrow without, being such the perfectionist that I tend to be and focused on what I did, what I fell short on today. And that's something I'm still navigating today. And I constantly am just trying to give myself grace to how I give other people. And I think if my younger self would hear that, the one who is always trying to be like 1% better every day. I mean, I was crazy in terms of like how I would wake up early, even in middle school and high school, and I would just train and train and train and train. And so many good lessons came out of that. But I wish I would have been kinder to myself during the process.
Do you think if you were kinder, it would have had a different outcome, or you think you like learned what you're supposed to learn and have been on track just the way that things are supposed to be?
I think it comes to my faith of where I'm such a believer that everything happens for a reason. And I think, like, truthfully, God made me the way I was. And I think I wouldn't be who I am today if I wasn't that person younger in my life. So I don't regret it. Well, I wish I would have heard that advice. Like I think I needed to learn some of the tough lessons and kind of go through and navigate the way I navigated. So now I think I could speak more highly on it and love others in a different way because of it.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and it just sounds like too, just from what you're saying, is giving yourself grace isn't not still striving for performance
Yeah.
and for, becoming the best, but it's just about acknowledging your mistakes and not having so much judgment or vitriol or negativity towards yourself. Cause I was very competitive too growing up, and I'm sure you can relate to just kind of the self, deprecation or frustration of, when you did mess up, there was also a culture of perfection. If you messed up, other people on your team might have had consequences for it and different things. And so you feel kind of the shame with it. And I think, the definition of grace, is releasing that shame and just kind of, being kind to yourself without such harsh judgment because it'll still work out just fine. Like the mistake happened and you move forward and you move on. And um, that's so incredible. Do you find in your work now, are you flawless or do you make mistakes and still have to give yourself grace? Like, have you ever made a mistake in broadcasting that
Oh,
felt some stress with or
I absolutely have. Oh, like I think back to some of the first games I've called, and it'll be the same way this spring. Like I'm sure some of my first games in the season, like I'm gonna say things that I wish I could rip out of the air and take right back, And that's how it is. And I think I'm trying to bring kind of the mindset that I've learned works well in athletics to every part of my life. Where if it's calling a game, I'll call the first inning. We'll have a 30-second break, commercial break, getting ready for the second inning, and I'll have a quick reflect like, okay, what did I like? What could I be better? Great, let's move forward. And that's how I'm trying to be in life. Like I picked up journaling a ton. And I think that's so much of how my day is of like, I'm grateful for this. This is the Bible verse I'm living by. I loved this today. I didn't really like this today, or I don't think I did great at this today. And then I feel like once it's out there, I just try to let it go and learn from it tomorrow, which maybe tomorrow I make the same mistake again. Maybe it takes me 2, 3 days to learn from it.
yeah.
That's just sometimes it happens that way. But at least it's like I'm processing, I'm getting it out so then I can move forward. Because I think as people, when we don't get it out, I think that's when it becomes a bigger problem eventually.
I really love that. I mean, especially in such a high stakes environment, being on live camera,
Yeah.
being kind to yourself through those mistakes and just, staying grounded in your character. Like, do you feel like knowing who you are and having that just self understanding is helpful when the cameras are on you and when there's so many people and you are absorbing a lot of stories? And so just staying in yourself, do you feel like you're self grounded? Do you feel like you get confused some days? Like, what is that like for you?
One of the best advices I actually got at Newhouse was the play-by-play class we had. And Professor Park, who is obviously a long time, he's the voice of the Orange. He does all these amazing things for the football and men's basketball. And he talked about how you want to talk the same as you do as the normal conversation like we're having, the same when you get on TV. You don't want to have that like broadcaster voice. And it sounds funny, but I hear it all the time now. And my thing of like feeling like I am talking, whether there's like a camera right here and I'm on right now, the same ways I'm talking with you right now helps me stay myself. And I think that's my like biggest goal is that I hope if somebody talks with me on TV and then talks with me outside of TV, that they don't hear anything different about their tone, or they just don't look at me any different and they don't think I talk to them any different. I think that's like my biggest goal is if I talk the same, I feel like I am the same. And you're going to get what you're getting here is what you get if, when I did the Vegas game 3 weeks ago and it was 64,000 people. So audience shouldn't matter. I just always want to stay myself.
I love that. That's really cool, actually, even to know that I never thought about not having a broadcaster voice or not having kind of a performance voice because, yeah, I feel like you do see that difference, but it does come across so genuine when it is the same person off camera or it is the same consistently. There's kind of just a warmth to the presence of that person.
Yeah.
Um, that's really cool.
Right, because you think about it, it's like you're listening to someone on TV, and I think the best ones who do it are the ones you feel like they're sitting watching a game with you. Like that's so
Yes.
easy and normal, the conversation going. Those are the people who are like, gosh, I like wish I knew them and could be friends with them. I think those are the ones who are most successful.
I'm going to keep that in mind. That is really cool. I love that piece of advice. I'm going to ask, my brother's name is Michael for our first time listeners. I'm going to ask Michael if he heard that at Newhouse too.
You
Because
have to ask
he has a broadcaster voice. I'm going to tell him to
I
cool it
love it.
off.
And Michael's crushing it too. Oh my gosh. Amazing.
That's awesome. So I guess I just want to ask one more question for you. Is there any person that you'd want to talk about or any story from your life, question, whatever it is that you don't normally get asked in interviews or podcasts that you just want to highlight that you feel like is kind of part of who you are, part of your story, and you would just like to share at this time?
Oh, wait, I'm so excited about this question. I feel like I want to talk about the women who are in my life because I think we are at such a really neat part in sports world right now where you start to see like very strong women who are taking a stand, who are showing why you should invest in them, why you should watch them play. Like women's sports is starting to become on the rise, which I love. And like to think that I have people in my family who were already those strong, badass females before it became like the thing, right? Before it was in style. And, I mentioned earlier I was with my grandmother, and I think just thinking about all of the women in my family, aunts, grandmothers, cousins. I have some incredible women. But when I think about my grandma and my mom specifically, like my grandma's 90 years old. She still has her glove. It has 3 fingers because that's how gloves looked back then. Like this thing, we've had to get restrung so many times. And and she's just the toughest lady. And what I love about her and my mom, because I think the greatest thing they taught me without even ever vocalizing it is what's crazy is if I was a kid and I fell around my grandma, there was no tears. Like it was wipe your tears, like let's keep it going. However, she could be that woman who taught me to be so strong. On the other end, if I felt so much immense unconditional love from her at all points. Like if there was always an open door, like she was there, open arms waiting for you. She was calling me every night. Like she just instilled so much love and toughness in me. And I think we live in a world where there's the tough love mentality and we think it has to be one or the other. And I think there's a way of doing both. And I commend her for so many ways. I've never even gotten to thank her for how she raised me. And then I look at my mom and she's, a strong lawyer who runs all of the businesses here at the same time of being the most loving, kind, gentle mother and grandmother now that I think I've ever seen. So I just, I want to give them their flowers because I look at the women that we have coming up now in sports and I'm so inspired and empowered by it. But I think it's so neat to be like, I grew up around women who were as strong, equally badass before, the stories were being praised.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That is so incredible. So shout out to your mom and your grandmother.
For the best.
Love them. That is awesome. That is so cool. Well, and there's no doubt that you are pouring a lot into the women of our younger generation too in sports. And I'm sure touching lives that you don't even know that you're impacting, but so cool that that has really just been inspired for you by your grandmother and your mom. So thank you so much for sharing that. I
Oh,
love that.
and thank you. I need to shout out you too, because what you're doing is amazing. I mean, no, I mean it. Even with like the podcast title, like I love that we are normalizing these conversations. And for anybody listening, athletics is such a huge world, but the fact that we are giving light to people who they are when they step off the field, off the court, or they hang up their cleats and their jersey, like you fall in love with these athletes as human beings, and it's going to be such a special place, and you're going to fall in love with them even more. So I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I hope our listeners have fallen in love with Sydney. I am so glad that she was here. Thank you so much for joining us, Sydney. And you can check out her From the Players podcast. I'm pretty sure Spotify, Apple Podcast. You can look her up on socials too. What's your social again, Sydney? Tell us where to find you.
You can find me Instagram, X, TikTok, all the things. Sydney, SYDNEY _ SUPPLE. A lot of fun stories coming your way soon. So excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney. And y'all, please go follow her. So go see the amazing things she's doing and just the amazing human being that she continues to be and spreading light. So thank you so much for coming, Sydney. And thank you for listening to the Life Beyond Labels podcast.